$15 a year. That is what the medication costs, the one that protects the result you paid thousands for. And it is not in the quote. Here's the thing about a hair transplant quote. It is a price for a procedure, a rate times a count on one day in one room. That is a real price. Americans pay for this one entirely out of pocket, so the number gets read carefully. It is also a complete answer to a question nobody asked. Because the question people actually type at midnight months after they get the quote is not, what does it cost? It is, how long does it last? And those are different questions with different owners. The clinic owns the first one, nobody owns the second. So let me stay with that $15 for a moment, because it is the smallest number in this video and it does the most work. Broken down, it is about 4 cents a day. That figure is the federal acquisition benchmark for a 1 milligram finasteride tablet as of July 2026. Government figures republished monthly. It is what a pharmacy pays to stock it, not what you pay at the counter. Those are different numbers and I am not going to blur them. 4 cents times a day for as long as, and that is the part the quote does not contain, not because anyone hid it, because it was never one of the line items. A quote itemizes what happens in the building. Why is there a drug in a surgery video at all? Because of what the surgery does precisely. It moves hair from the back of your head to the front. It relocates. It does not treat. The hair it moves is resistant. The hair it does not move is not. So the peer-reviewed literature puts it about as plainly as literature ever does. The coverage a transplant achieves can be diminished by continued miniaturization and loss of the hairs that were never transplanted. Read that twice because it is the whole video in one sentence. The transplanted hair can be doing fine while the picture gets worse, because the picture was never only the transplanted hair. Therefore, the result you bought is standing in a field that keeps moving, and the thing that slows the field down is not surgical. It is a tablet in a bottle. So how long do you take it? The clinical reference, the one clinicians actually read, updated August 2025, says patients should continue treatment through the surgical period and indefinitely afterward to help maximize results. Indefinitely. That is the word. Not for a year, not until it settles. A cost with no end date attached to a purchase that was sold with one. The bottle has a number 2, by the way, on the same federal benchmark. Topical minoxidil runs approximately 28 cents a milliliter as of early 2025. I am deliberately not turning that into a yearly figure because that would need a daily dose I could not source properly, and I would rather leave a gap than fill it with a guess. And the current review of the field is candid about where this whole layer breaks. The medication is offered as long-term maintenance, and the side effect profile remains a major barrier to long-term compliance. That is not me warning you about anything I am not qualified to, and I'm not going to. It is the field saying, in its own words, that staying on it is where people fall off. But if the maintenance is where the result actually lives, then the interesting question is no longer the tablet, it is the surgery count. And before I go to the surgery count, there is one more line in that census I cannot walk past because it is the same argument made by the people who do this for a living. Count who walks through their door. As of 2024, the average member reportedly saw about 156 surgical patients in the year, down from 165 3 years earlier. Over the same 3 years, non-surgical patients went from 396 to 498. Surgery down, non-surgery up by nearly 30%. I want to be careful about what that does and does not prove. It is patients per member, self-reported, and the field is growing overall. So this is a shift in mix, not a collapse in surgery, but a mix is exactly what we're talking about. The profession's own center of gravity is moving toward the part that repeats, the part that is not a one-time purchase, which makes the next number strange in a way it would not otherwise be. So, how many procedures does this take? The profession keeps a census of itself. As of 2024, it reportedly puts the average at 1.5 surgical procedures per patient to achieve the desired result. The median is 1. About 2/3 of the surgeons who answered said 1 procedure was their average. 1. That is a good number. That is the number a person hopes for when they are reading a quote at midnight. And as of 2024, reportedly about 85% of the people in that chair are men, though the share of women has been climbing for 3 straight census years. It is the number the industry can honestly point to today, but an average of 1.5 with a median of 1 tells you something extra, and it is worth saying out loud. Most people are at 1, and a minority are pulling the average up. That is what it means when the mean floats above the median. Somebody is going back, and that is still not the strange part. The strange part is what that same census said before. In 2016, the same survey, the same profession, reportedly put it at 5 procedures per patient. 5. 2019, 3.4. 2021, 1.4. As of 2024 to 1.5. So in 8 years, the number that decides how many times you pay went from 5 to about 1.5. Not because bodies changed, because practice did. And that reframes the sentence everybody in this market says. One procedure is usually enough is not a fact about your hair. It is a description of how surgery is currently being done, an answer that is 8 years old, that replaced a completely different answer, and that could be replaced again. Therefore, when a clinic tells you one session will do it, they are not lying to you. They are quoting the current practice pattern. Those are not the same promise. Now put the second series next to the first one, because alone each is a fact and together they are a mechanism. While procedures per patient fell, the first session got bigger. Reportedly 2,029 grafts in 2016, 2,083 in 2019, 2,176 in 2021, 2,347 as of 2024. Fewer visits, bigger visits. That is not a contradiction, it is a strategy. And on the whole, a sensible one. One recovery instead of 3. One flight instead of 3. One fee instead of 3. The savings are real. The risks of spending a finite supply faster are also real. That is the honest read, and both halves of it come from the same table. But notice what is being spent to buy that convenience. Every graft in a bigger first session comes out of the same place, and that place is the one number in this entire video that nobody advertises. The back and sides of your head. The clinical reference calls the donor site one of the primary limiting factors regardless of technique, not a limiting factor among many, one of the primary ones. There is a defined safe zone with a typical density 65 to 85 follicular units per square centimeter, and when you take from it, it does not refill. Hair is redistributed, not created. That is the honest physics of the whole procedure, and it is also why every graft has 2 prices, the one on the invoice and the one you can never spend again. And here is the detail that told me the profession has already thought this through more carefully than the marketing has. That same reference warns against grafting only the crown, because doing so can prematurely use donor grafts and risk an unnatural look as loss continues around them. Read what that assumes. It assumes loss continues. Future loss is not a risk case in surgical planning. It is the baseline the plan is drawn against. So the surgeon is planning for a second act. The quote is priced for the first one. Which brings us to what a second act actually costs in the only unit this market really uses. The same census reports it. A subsequent procedure reportedly averages 1,637 grafts as of 2024. It was 1,641 in 2021, 1,621 in 2019. Notice how stable that is. The first procedure number has been climbing for a decade. The second procedure number has barely moved, and notice the size. 1,600 grafts is not a touch-up, not a tidy, not a small correction. It is roughly 2/3 of a first procedure. If it happens, it is a real operation with a real invoice drawn from a donor area that is now smaller than it was. And there is a version of this that changes shape depending on where the first one happened. If you bought a package abroad, the all-in kind, where the price folds in the operation, the aftercare, the hotel, and the airport transfer, then that price bought one trip. A second procedure is not a second line on the same invoice. It is a second decision in a different year at whatever that market charges then, with the travel priced again from scratch. The bundle was honest about what it covered. It just covered a trip, and the condition is not a trip. But before anyone builds a plan on these numbers, they deserve the same scrutiny I am asking you to apply to the quote. Because every figure I have given you from that census comes from a voluntary survey of surgeons. Approximately a quarter of the members answered, 247 of them. The society itself reports a margin of roughly 5 points and says the margin should be treated as an estimate because a voluntary study with an incentive is not a random sample. A few outliers were removed to keep them from skewing the result, and nobody independently verified what any respondent reported. That is the best public number the profession has about itself. It is self-reported, partially answered, and unaudited. I am not telling you to discard it, I am using it all the way through this video because nothing better exists. I am telling you what it is so that when a clinic quotes an industry average at you, you know exactly how much weight that phrase can carry. Therefore, the honest position is not, you will need to. It is not one is enough either. It is that nobody in this transaction can tell you the number, including the people selling it, and the census is the receipt for that. So here is where I have landed, and it is not a verdict on hair transplants. It is a question about what a price covers. The quote covers a procedure. It does not cover the condition, which continues. It does not cover the tablet, which the reference says continues indefinitely. It does not cover the donor area, which does not come back, and it cannot cover the second procedure because nobody, not you, not the surgeon, not the census, knows today whether it happens. None of that makes the price wrong. A one-time price for a one-time operation is a fair thing to sell. It just means the number on that page answers a smaller question than the one you were asking at midnight. So the thing worth asking before you accept it is not how much. It is not even how long. It is, what is this a price of? 3 verification criteria make that question answerable, and none of them require trusting me. The framework does not recommend anything. It just hands the arithmetic back so the plan stays your own plan. Ask what the quote assumes about the years after it, in writing, in its own words. Ask what happens to the price if a second procedure is ever discussed, and who decides that it is. And ask what the plan does with the donor area it is not using today, because that is the only part of this that cannot be rebought. If the answers add up to 1 day in 1 room, then that is fine as long as that is what you thought you were buying. Subscribe. The real cost of care? No clinic ads. You shouldn't have to go broke to feel whole.